Upload.
BBC Radio Wiltshire.
Yeah, so if you're creative in the county, come on. Let's get your showcase work on the radio. If we like it, we'll share it with everyone else. Salisbury writer Jane Woodhouse has uploaded an extract from her new folk horror story, which, is an interesting genre. We'll chat more in a moment, but Jane, first of all, just give us a little scene set and introduce what we're about to hear.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's called Edgelands, and you're about to hear the opening extract from the first chapter, which is really setting up all the events that are going to happen. It's an isolated house in a rather spooky location, and a young couple are being shown round. They're very, very eager to rent it because it's very cheap. But really, we all want to shriek, run away.
Oh, OK, let's crack on then.
The house always took him by surprise, seeming to appear out of nowhere as he made the final turn along the rutted dirt track. Smaller than he remembered, and set back against the tree line. An old farm worker's cottage, built of red brick and tile, with those unusually large glass windows reflecting the light. And no matter what the time of day or weather, the back of the house always overshadowed by the edge of the woods. The young couple had arrived before him. The man barely gave him time to gather up his clipboard and papers before advancing with hand outstretched. "I'm Martin Cooper. Thank you for showing us round so soon." "David Stainsby," he replied, as they shook hands. "We love the house," the woman spoke up. She was slight and pale, with blonde, wispy hair. "I'm so sorry," Martin said. "This is my wife, Penelope." "Penny, please," she said. "We couldn't believe our luck when we were invited for a viewing. We must have had hundreds of applicants at that rent," Martin continued. "Yes, well, this is a very special property," said David. "Look at this view, it's perfect." Penny was gazing at the rolling countryside beyond the overgrown frontage of the house. The fields, a perfect patchwork, stitched together by ancient hedgerows. The nearest village was barely visible in the distance, the outline of its roofs and chimneys like pencil marks on the horizon. "Shall we see inside?" said David, trying to hurry things along. "We can't wait, can we, darling?" Martin took his wife's hand. "The garden's a bit overgrown, I'm afraid, but the owners will pay for it to be put to rights." He fumbled for the iron key that had been weighing him down from the moment he put it in his pocket. "We don't mind. I've always wanted my own garden." That was the wife again. "I'd like to take care of it myself if we're accepted as tenants, of course." "Good luck with that," thought David, imagining her trying to hack through the tangle of thorns and brambles which were encroaching on the path. Then he had the key in the lock and was managing to hide the tremor in his hand as he opened the front door. "After you!" He stepped back so that the couple had to enter before him. The door opened straight into the single living room, complete with open fireplace and full of original features, he recited, meaning the exposed beams riddled with woodworm and a hearth which always smoked. In one corner, a steep staircase led up to a short landing. "This is the main bedroom." David showed them into the larger of the two upstairs rooms. "The view from up here is particularly impressive," he began, but Penny was already entranced. "It's so beautiful," she said, and that was the moment David knew they would take the lease. "Don't get carried away, darling. Stainsby's must have lots more people to show round." Martin was trying to make light of things, but it was clear how many hopes he'd invested in this place. "Let me show you the kitchen." David led them back down to the living room and through to the back of the house. He fumbled for the electric light switch, although the bare bulb hanging down in the centre did little to dispel the heavy gloom. A single window was too small to let in much daylight, and almost completely overgrown. The random array of mismatched wooden cupboards and stained white sink were covered with dust and cobwebs. But Martin and Penny loved everything. "This is a real chance for us, isn't it, darling?" Martin turned to his wife. "Penny hasn't been well, you see, and the doctor said she needed complete rest. Don't, Martin. She tried to stop him. You see, things have been going bad since I lost my job, and then we had to sell our flat. But we've turned the corner at last. I'm starting out on my own now. David doesn't want to hear all that. Penny spoke sharply, letting David see for the first time that there might be more to her than he'd thought. I'd like to know why no one in the village has moved in. There must be plenty of local people who jump at the chance to live practically rent-free. Stronger and sharper, thought David, and he had a momentary doubt that he'd underestimated her. The owner wanted to bring in some new people and raise the property values. Really? She sounded unconvinced. Can we see outside? Does this door even open? Unlike the front door, this one was made of solid oak, strengthened with iron bands, with heavy bolts at the top and bottom. David was relieved to see the deep scratches were hidden in the gloom. That looks like top security, laughed Martin. Just another period feature, David mumbled. We think it came from a much older building. David had a second key, which he'd wrapped in an old cloth so as not to feel it burning against his skin. As he moved his hand towards it, he felt his heart start to pound against his chest. Amazing, said Martin. How wonderful to be surrounded by all this history. I'm not so sure, said Penny. She was pulling at the tendrils of ivy which had forced their way through the edges of the door. It's going to need a lot of work. We'll have this all cleared, David answered quickly. He could feel the sweat sticking to the back of his shirt, and knew he couldn't stay in the house one moment longer. I'm afraid you'll need to view the garden from the outside. I seem to have forgotten the key.
Edgelands there, written by Jane Woodhouse and read by Jack Cunningham. It draws you in a funny way, like this sort of house did in many ways, doesn't it, Jane?
Well, I hope it does, because the house is almost like a character, a real live character in the book. And it certainly has lots of potential for getting people involved in what it might be like to live there and what it might be like to be there late at night in the dark.
Well, the main thing you sort of think, we heard about nearly 6 minutes of that. All the way through, you're thinking, why? Why are you saying that? Or why is this? That seems to be the kind of feeling about this. Why?
Yes, exactly. And that's what the opening part of any story should try and do, is create questions in the reader's mind so that they want to read on and find out what some of those answers to the questions might be.
Yeah, and what's the biggest challenge in writing horror and I guess not going too far one way or the other on it? Yeah,
that's the biggest challenge, not to go so over the top that people start to laugh, basically. And also it's an attempt to try and steer away from the stereotypes, the ghosts and the bumps in the night type thing, and offer something that's just a little bit different so that people get a shock, but in a way that they weren't expecting.
I sort of had the house in my mind. You sort of the door was on the left, and you sort of went in, and,
yes.
and then the other door, the big heavy one, was sort of further on the left. And I kind of had a sort of garden I sort of seen before. Did you have anywhere in mind in particular, somewhere you've stayed on holiday or anything like this, that kind of even partly comes into your imagination when you wrote this?
I imagined the house itself, but the place was very, very redolent of somewhere I stayed a few years ago in Sussex, which was, we'd gone there for a nice quiet weekend, and it was a cottage on the edge of the woods. And because I live in the city, it's very much a contrast to me to be in a place without street lights where you can hear owls hooting and things like that. So my imagination was working overdrive. And of course, it was purely imaginary, of course, but when I got up in the morning every day, it seemed that the woods had moved a little bit closer to the house where we were staying.
Oh no, that's weird. That's weird.
So
goodness.
That was the inception of this story.
It kind of feels like the Mystery House on Escape to the Country. They've not read the room in well, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. Beware of persuasive estate agents.
And where and when can we read the rest of the story?
Oh, Oh, well, I hope I've got to write the rest of it, but I hope that won't be too far ahead because I have the story planned in my mind. But it's always good to get a little bit of feedback early on to think if people are gripped by it and drawn in and that that's something that they might want to carry on reading.
You see, that's probably one of the reasons I don't do writing myself, because if it was in my mind, I'd probably be up day and night just getting it out of my head because I'd forget it How do you not forget it? Do you have lots of notes, or have you just got an incredible memory?
I have lots and lots of notes. I am known as the person who is never without a notebook because everywhere I go, I write notes. So I'm constantly building up the structure and the skeleton of the story. And if you've got that in your mind, you can then start to create and embellish it much more gradually, as long as you know where the story's going, who the characters are, what ending you're aiming towards. All of that can develop much more slowly over time.
Brilliant.
And of course, it's just wonderful to hear someone with Jack's skills and talents give a voice to it and really bring it alive in that way.
It is fabulous, absolutely fab. And how can we find out more about you? Have you got socials and stuff?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, Jane Woodhouse, and I've got a website, janewoodhouse.com. It's Jayne.
I was going to say Jane with a Y, yes, absolutely.
Jane with a Y, yes.
Like the story has. It's all got a Y tonight.
Exactly, that's a good link.
Jane, it's been lovely chatting to you on the Uploader. Thank you for being with us today.
Upload. BBC.
Radio Wiltshire.